so this is actually one of my first Avalanche workshops. I think I might have done one a long time ago, so I'm really excited to be here doing this one. Essentially, we're going to be going through two core concepts that we've been kind of perpetuating on Avalanche quite a bit recently, which is the idea of social login, and specifically separating social login into, number one, direct social login, and social login tied in with Web 2 logins, or Web 3 login, sorry. Because basically a big part of what we build is kind of this idea of getting users into applications, specifically applications on Avalanche and other EVM chains, through accounts that they already own and are already familiar with. So for example, their Google account, their email, stuff like that. So I'm gonna be going through a few things. First, I'm gonna kind of go through an overview of what this is. Then we're gonna go through the code of like how this actually works and how you can implement Particle Auth or Particle Connect, which I'll kind of define these two in a moment within your own Avalanche application. We actually just wrapped up a big hackathon with Avalanche. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was the Avalanche Frontier Hackathon. So we're really excited about that. We actually co-hosted that with the Ava Labs guys alongside Dora Hacks and Chainlink, Covalent. We had about, I think, 166 projects that came out of that, so really exciting. We're pumped about that. So this is going to go into the concepts that hackathon covered and that the goal of that was. So specifically, like I mentioned, Particle Auth and Particle Connect. But I guess for a quick intro, I'm Ethan. I do developer relations at Particle Network. I've been doing DevRel, I think, for almost 3 years now, very similar to how long Usman's been doing DevRel for. I used to work at an RPC provider. Now I've been at Particle Network for about 7 or 8 months now. In Web3 when I was about 15, started working at that RPC provider whenever I was 16, and now I turned 18 just about a month or two ago and have been loving it at Particle Network. So yeah, I guess what I want to do first is kind of understand this concept of wallet as a service. So wallet as a service is something that you might hear pretty often across the ecosystem. This is actually like our core service at the moment. So we build a few different things. Like one of our flagship products is this idea of WAS, or wallet as a service. Essentially what this refers to is like a technology that allows you to onboard into applications, like I mentioned, with your social accounts. So specifically it does this through basically guiding a user through kind of an OAuth process. So like I mentioned, Google, Twitter, anything you can imagine pretty much, usually via JWT. Then the actual wallet that results from that process, the account that results from that process, is interacted with via an embedded wallet. So something that's actually embedded within the application. They can use just like they would MetaMask, but they actually don't need to download anything. They don't need to handle private keys, stuff like that. So this process of actually getting users into an account via social login, we separate into basically two different services. The first is something called Particle Auth. Particle Auth is essentially our core service for just directly facilitating social login. So getting users into social login accounts very simply through just like connect Google buttons. So things that you might see on traditional websites like YouTube or Lucidchart, stuff like that are compatible with OAuth. Particle Connect is kind of maybe a cooler product where it's actually merging Web 2 and Web 3 login. So for the Avalanche Frontier Hackathon, we had a lot of projects that use Particle Connect to basically facilitate a Connect wallet button that you go to, and as a user you say, maybe I want to use Google, maybe I want to use MetaMask, maybe I want to use Coinbase Wallet, Rainbow, whatever it may be. It's all there in one interface that users can interact with, and allowing basically Web 3 natives and maybe less Web 3 native people, so more Web 2 native people, to actually onboard into applications. So a big part of wallet as a service, like one of the flagship components here, is the ability to create accounts without the need to actually secure your own private key. So this is really important. We actually do this by MPC TSS, which very simply is just a mechanism for generating a private key and basically two distinct shares. One share is saved on the user's local device. Another share is saved within a trusted execution environment. Each of these shares individually kind of contribute to signature generation. So whenever I click confirm with an embedded wallet with a wallet that's generated via wallet as a service, what's happening is that on my device, there's half of a signature being generated, and on Particle's trusted execution environment, the other half of the signature is being generated, therefore authenticating a transaction. So this means that there is no single point of failure. There's no one place where signatures are being generated from. You remove a lot of the risks that are associated with carrying a single private key, and of course, actually asking users to secure the single point of failure, like you would typically within MetaMask. So this is kind of the thing that we built here, and we tie this very closely in with account abstraction, which we've also deployed natively on Avalanche to basically enable this process of like logging with your Google account into a wallet, which then is of course bound to a smart account. And we built a ton of different SDKs. I think we have like 33 SDKs now. Of course, all of them are compatible with Avalanche. So kind of to visualize this, maybe to make this a little bit easier to understand beyond just like me talking about it, is this example here. This is an application called Apex. I use this all the time as like an example of somebody that's integrated our SDK. As you can see, it's like pretty simple. I'm just logging in through my Google account. They have like this actually natively embedded wallet interface. So you can also open our native wallet interface, send crypto, receive crypto. All this was through 2 clicks. So I literally just clicked Google, I selected the account that I wanted, and I'm into this application. I can deposit funds, super simple. Another really big example of this on Avalanche would probably be 01. So 01 is one of our core partners on Avalanche. They natively use our SDK to, again, onboard users into 01 via social login. So recently we've been kind of perpetuating this idea of smart wallet as a service, which is actually an evolution from wallet as a service that incorporates account abstraction really closely. That's kind of where the smart term is kind of appended to the beginning there. So how this works, and I'm going to start getting a little bit technical in terms of how we actually achieve this, is that basically after social login, like I mentioned, the way that we're doing this is that we're generating an EOA or a standard account via MPC TSS. So we're generating these 2 signatures, or these 2 keys, sorry, and these are each contributing to the creation of an externally owned account, a standard account structure. Now what we're doing is we're actually taking this account and assigning a smart account to this. So Biconomy, Zero Dev, Simple Account, CyberConnect, any of these kind of normal smart account structures, we're assigning that to the EOA that we're generating via social login. Then we can natively generate, leverage ERC 437. So gasless transactions, do user operations, session keys, stuff like that. Kind of the normal benefits of account abstraction. But of course, for the user, it all starts here with the social login. They have no idea that they're actually generating a normal account, and for them, the core interface with the blockchain is that smart account. So it's kind of low resolution, but I have some examples here of programmatically what this will look like, and I'll dive more into this. But basically, you can connect a user via social login in 1 line of code, essentially 1 method call via a hook that we have with React. Then you can assign a smart account implementation also with basically 1 object that we have, and then of course natively leverage account abstraction through, again, very simple to use different objects and methods that we have within our SDK. So this is kind of complicated. I have this on most of the slides that I do with this kind of presentation. I usually kind of skim over it because it gets pretty detailed here, but a big part of when we were building this that we wanted to be a fundamental component of this SDK was being as modular as possible. So on Biconomy, there's a ton of AA providers. There's, I think, or not on Biconomy, on Avalanche there's a ton of AA providers, including Biconomy. I think Zero Dev is on Avalanche. You have Pimlico, StackUp, all these guys support Avalanche. So we didn't want to necessarily box a developer into saying, you have to use our AA infrastructure, or you have to use Biconomy, or you have to use StackUp. So this whole idea of modular SDK, of modular smart walls as a service, is the ability to give developers native compatibility with every different smart account implementation, any different paymaster, bundler, whatever they want to use that they feel would fit with their application best. I had a great conversation yesterday with the StackUp team. We have a booth at the main ETHDenver event. I was standing there, and they walked up, and we were chatting. And I think them, as well as Zero Dev, which I also did a panel with yesterday, these are infrastructure providers that they value SDKs like this, where it gives developers the freedom to truly use whatever they want, because there is no one size fits all. We don't think that our SDK or our infrastructure will be best for everybody, so we give them the freedom to basically choose whatever they want, and this is a visualization of that modularity. But on the flip side, we do have infrastructure for basically everything. We have a bundler, we have a smart account, paymaster, of course we do key management, we have the wallet as a service, so and even now, I know that this blockchain section down here is not highlighted at the moment, but we're also going to be deploying a blockchain pretty soon. So we're covering everything on the spectrum in terms of kind of abstraction, because again, we want developers to have a very straightforward path to implementation, 15 minutes basically. But we want, of course, that modularity to be included in there. That's why we include compatibility with every other name on this list. Another kind of visualization of this, we kind of separate implementations of our SDK into 2 components. Either a native implementation, which you can use either our bundler by default, Biconomy or Particle as a paymaster, then Biconomy, CyberConnect, or Simple Account. Also Alchemy now as a smart account, and then of course, and then Particle as a signer. So by signer, I mean the actual smart account that's using the MPC wallet for signatures. An external implementation is going to be a little bit different. So this is going to be basically whenever you're actually calling an API to generate, for example, a paymaster signature or pushing something through a bundler. That would happen through any of those other providers, which would be an external implementation, so something that you actually do manually. But again, it all for developers is just a matter of is it going to be 5 lines of code or 10 lines of code? It's all pretty simple. So this is, I'm going to kind of go through some of these examples in a moment, but the idea is that you minimize programmatic complexity to the greatest possible degree. Because account abstraction, historically, developers seem to have this idea that working with AA is difficult and it is different than normal transactions, and that isn't really true anymore. So as I'll get into, you can basically do account abstraction transactions, so work with smart accounts, the exact same way that you would with normal transactions, which means that you can implement this with pretty much 0 overhead. Okay, so what I want to do now, while that catches up, is I want to go through an example of actually kind of building an application with Particle Auth core. So I'm going to go through some code that kind of guides everybody through this, but I think it's still catching up. So I have a QR code on screen here with the GitHub. Let me actually try to exit out here. Let's see if that'll pop up. I think it's still a little bit behind. There you go. But let me open up my Replit here. I use Replit as my IDE, and I wanted to go through a few examples of what this actually looks like for a full application. There we go. Cool. So this is my IDE.
Sorry, can you zoom in a little bit?
Sure. Do what?
Zoom in.
Yeah, sure. Let's see if I can. Okay, is that a little bit better? Let's see. Perfect. Cool. Cool. Yeah, so this is a very basic application. This is actually the demo, or like a variation of the demo that I used for, I think, the Avalanche Frontier Hackathon for the repository there. It's super basic. It's like 80 lines of code. So the way that we're doing this here is basically that we are importing a number of different libraries. So Ethers is kind of like the core driver here, and we have compatibility with Ethers, VM, Web3.js, any like standard library that you might use to interact with Web3. Then we basically control our entire SDK through hooks. So this example specifically is Particle Connect, which is, again, that kind of SDK that enables this dual login with either your Web2 login or your Web3 wallet. So we do all this through hooks. It's very simple. We're basically doing the entire thing just through a single, actually React component, a Connect Wallet React component. But in this case, we have like a disconnect function via the use particle connect hook, and we have account info retrieval through the use account info hook. Smart account configuration is, like I mentioned, very modular. So on Avalanche, we support, I believe, simple account, Alchemy, if I'm correct, and Biconomy at the moment. Which means here what I can do is I can basically switch this out. Right now it's on simple. I can change this to Biconomy if I want, or Alchemy. I don't know if this version supports Alchemy, maybe not, but even like Cyber Connect. And that one line of code will basically change the implementation that I'm using on the actual application. So developers can change one variable or one kind of a parameter here that will alter the entire smart account structure that they're using on the application, making it, again, very open to them choosing whatever fits best for their application. But in this case, I'm going to stick with simple account, which I think is still there. And the way that this application is kind of structured is through Ethers. So Ethers is what I use for most of my examples. You can also use Web3.js, like I mentioned, or VM. These are just like normal Web3 frameworks that you can use to structure transactions, send transactions, do it through kind of like a uniform syntax standard. And we usually encourage this because what you can do in this case is like, imagine you have an application on Avalanche that you've already built out, right? But you realize like maybe you want like gasless transactions, you want to incorporate sponsored transactions, or you want to remove signatures, right? These are all things that ZeroDev is exploring, for example, that we've been talking to them, or 01, sorry, that we've been talking to them about and that they're currently implementing. So like you already have an application, you want to start implementing account abstraction to it via social login. In this case, the easiest way to do that would be like you're already using Ethers, right? So you're very simply just like building a new Ethers provider that's mapped to Smart Account, this configuration of our account abstraction SDK, that routes all transactions through our social login embedded wallet. So I'm just simply doing a new Ethers provider here. I'm using a wrap provider, which is a custom 1193 provider object that we can construct via the Smart Account object here, which is again derived from our SDK. Then in this application, I'm kind of doing two main things. So number one is I'm pulling the user's balance. This is just an example of like basically number one, getting the Smart Account address that we generate, which in this case would be simple account, like I defined up here. Then taking that address, pulling the balance off of it, and then setting that balance and displaying it on the front end via a React state. From there, I'm executing a very simple user operation on Avalanche, which is just a burn of 0.0001 AVAX. This is actually gasless because I have AVAX in my paymaster on the Particle dashboard, which is sponsoring this transaction. Then I'm displaying this transaction on screen. And I have a second function here just kind of for displaying another cool thing of a part of account abstraction, which is the ability to batch transactions. So in this case, what I'm doing is actually generating two transactions. They're identical. One's a burn of, again, a very small amount of AVAX. The second one is the same thing. But we actually do both these transactions in one like real transaction. So this is called, you typically refer to this as two individual user operations with account abstraction. These can be executed at once, simultaneously, through AA, which I'll showcase in a moment once I run this application.
Is it a single transaction?
It's a single transaction. So with kind of the way that account abstraction works, that typically you'll have multiple user operations bundled into a single transaction, like you can kind of distinctive, like transactions are typically like with EOAs, it's like one thing, right? So one contract call, something like that. With account abstraction, transactions are usually bundles of user operations, which each refer to an individual action. Like for example, burning 0.001 AVAX to the set address. Each of those would be considered a user operation, which by using batching, you can have in one single transaction. So this is a pretty cool idea that we see a lot of applications do, usually for like gas optimization. So if you can do 5 transactions at once within like one actual transaction, rather than having to, for example, do these individually, you save a ton on gas. So this is a big thing that we see pretty popular on Avalanche. So let me go ahead and run this and kind of showcase what this code actually does. Again, it's very simple. I think this is just about, 107 lines of code. So it really isn't very complicated. It's just those pure functions, all of which is using ethers. Standard tooling, our SDK is only used for that initial configuration component. So I'm going to click Connect Wallet. I'm going to choose my Google account. Of course, I can also go down here, Twitter, Discord, GitHub, Twitch, stuff like that. I can go to MetaMask, Wallet Connect, Rainbow, anything you want to do. But I'm going to choose Google by social login and choose this account right here. Still loading on that side. And it should be pulling my balance here in a moment once my internet loads. There we go. Cool, so I have about 0.55 AVAX on this account, as you can see right there. This is actually on Avalanche mainnet, so this isn't Fuji or anything. But that's my address, that's my smart account address, my simple account. Like I mentioned, the big thing here is I just logged in with social login. So this is totally attached to my MetaMask. This is like an individual account that I'm generating via MPC TSS. So how do I actually interact with this account outside of the application? Well, this is what this little pop-up down here is for. So this little particle logo, if I click this, what will happen is a very MetaMask-like pop-up shows up, which allows the user to then engage with the wallet beyond just what the application offers. So now I can send AVAX, I can retrieve my address, I can actually buy crypto via an on-ramp, swap, bridging, stuff like that. Pretty simple, all through the single interface. So that's kind of a big part of wallet as a service in terms of providing users with this interface without, of course, you need to actually download anything. So again, this computer has no extensions, it has no applications downloaded onto it. This is all natively within this web application. So let me actually go ahead and actually do a user operation here. So let me click on execute user operation. This will just do one simple burn of AVAX. I believe it was 0.001 or something like that. So this will pop up with a signature. I'll basically this very simply is just a user operation hash. Right now, a lot of wallets, including our own, don't really decode this and showcase exactly what's happening. But by signing this, what's going to happen is what I just defined programmatically, which is that burn. That will be executed on chain via a user operation, and it will be sponsored because I've set up my paymaster to do so. So click confirm. Then in a moment, I think the internet on my computer is a little bit off, but it should pop up with kind of a transaction hash that I can click into and open the Explorer with. There we go. Cool, it says it was successful. This won't actually display the transaction itself because what account abstraction typically does is it interacts with the entry point contract, which is a part of the ERC 437 standard. So the actual value being transferred typically is I guess this doesn't have internal transaction or anything, but typically it would be kind of a part of the contract call. So most explorers, they won't show that value transfer directly, but it's still happening. So this is a burn of 0.001 AVAX, all was gasless, done through that code that I just did a moment ago, which was I think 6 or 7 lines of code, so pretty simple. The same thing with a batch user operation. It's going to look identical for the end user. I'll sign something as I'll open up here, and that will again commit the transaction, send it to Avalanche mainnet, and there it is. Let's see if I can open this right here. And I'll give that a second to process, and then it should pop up in a moment, but I'll give it a moment. So this would basically be the exact same thing, again, kind of just like a normal Explorer entry, but in this case, I'm burning 2 individual transactions, 2 batches of AVAX in one actual on-chain transaction, which in my case, if I did 2 other transactions, that would be 2 batches of gas that I'm paying for, instead of just 1 batch of gas that I'm paying for this one transaction. So you can see, successful, pretty standard stuff. So that's Avalanche, or that's Particle Connect, which is natively deployed on Avalanche. That was a big part of what we did within the Avalanche Frontier Hackathon. From what I saw with a lot of submissions to that hackathon, I would say probably 60% of them at least use Particle Connect. It seems to be quite a popular solution because of that full solution for both Web3 wallets and Web2 logins. So the alternative here is something that I actually wrote this while I was judging hackathon submissions at the main event just an hour ago. So this is very simple, almost the exact same structure as the last one. but this is a little bit more standard. So this might be a little bit easier to kind of understand from a programmatic perspective. So it should be opening here. This is actually using particle auth. Particle auth, like I mentioned, is differentiated from Particle Connect through just basically the ability to actually do social logins directly rather than through that interface that I just went through. So like with Particle Connect, this is the interface that we typically have users log in through. It's just like you can choose Web2 logins or your Web3 wallet. This is great, but a lot of applications, maybe they want like a button that's sign in with Google or sign in with Twitter, and that's like actually on their application. So this is what Particle Auth is for, more direct, a little bit more like lower level when it comes to initiating social logins. So this is almost like the identical in terms of like an identical application structure. I'm defining the smart account object, which is a collection of different like API keys, as well as, of course, the smart account configuration here. Also simple account on Avalanche. I'm defining a custom Ethos provider. Also quite simple, same way that I'm doing it as last time. I'm just constructing this provider, then I'm sending transactions through this provider, fetching the user balance, same exact mechanism. In this case, I actually have defined an additional function called handle login. This connect function here, which I think I showed a moment ago on the slides, is basically just like all you need to initiate social login. So as soon as this is called, this connect with your social type and the chain, what will happen is that like the user will be immediately thrown into an OAuth process. So if I have Google here, then their Google sign-in page will open on that same window. They'll choose an account, then it'll redirect them back to the application, and we'll have different variables on this application be populated, therefore indicating that the user has logged in and taking them to kind of the next page in the process. So this is the kind of same function as last time, execute user op, doing the same thing, burning some AVAX, but of course in this case it's just doing so through that alternative mechanism. So let me run this, and you'll see it's almost the exact same UI. So let's see. Here we go. So this is, as you can see, kind of new buttons. So like individual buttons that each kind of take the user into a different OAuth flow. So we have Google, X, and also this interesting button right here, which opens up a general authentication modal that users can use. So you can type in your email, you can even use your phone number, you can do Facebook, GitHub, stuff like that. Very similar to the last one, but again, these are direct social logins, so there is no Web3 wallet functionality on this demo application. Well, I'm going to click on the button that I actually made, which is the sign up with Google button. Pretty standard. I'm going to click on the same account. And cool. So I have some AVAX, as you can see. I spent some of it writing these transactions, but very similar interface. I have the embedded wallet, which in this case is the same smart account, different SDK, but it's all resolving to the same thing because our system is a closed system. So whenever I have one social login account, that's the same account that I'm using across every application, across every chain. Including, if I'm on 001 and I go to maybe Campfire Exchange, which actually also supports our wallet, and it'll be the same address across both applications. So very similarly, I will do a user operation. As you'll see, it's going to be basically the same thing as last time, but in this case, it's just a lower level flow on the SDK side, which we actually see a lot of developers choose. Like I said, about 40% of the Frontier Hackathon use this SDK over the Connect SDK because maybe they wanted a more kind of bespoke approach to how they were implementing social logins. As you can see, that's a hash right there, all good to go on that. So this is kind of the flow that we've been implementing. What I'm going to do is open up this demo right here. And this is our core demo. I think it should load, there we go. So kind of like a big part of our vision going into the next, and this is just kind of more of the same, but I wanted to open this anyways to showcase it. But I want to highlight that like a big part of our vision going into the next few months is that like, we've built out the solution really over a year now, and it's been pretty successful. I think we have about 17 million users in total, about 4 million daily active users that use a social login and interact with that wallet. Avalanche is one of our top chains in terms of like active applications, active developers, and users that are actually using it. But what we recognize is like, even if you onboard through the simple process, even if you've onboarded through social login and kind of use these kind of easy methods into account abstraction and so on, a bigger part of the problem usually exists within the actual interaction process, so actually doing transactions. Once you exit a single application, so like, well, this application that I just made might be easy for a user to use. Anybody can click that button and log in, whatever, right? But as soon as they exit that application, try to go to the rest of the ecosystem, the entire experience breaks down really quickly into something that is like, at least to say less than ideal. It's just like something that like users really, we should never expect them to use, especially when you start doing things across chains. Now Avalanche has made a lot of like big efforts towards this with like warp messaging across subnets and whatnot to make that experience easier. But our goal at Particle is to kind of usher in this idea of chain abstraction, which a lot of people have been kind of perpetuating over the past month or 2 months. The idea of chain abstraction is that a user should never know what chain they're on, like period. They should have no conception of what chain that they're using within the application. If they're using a Subnet, or if they're using Avalanche, or if they're using any other blockchain, they shouldn't know. It should be up to the developer based on where they believe their application could be best deployed. And like the way that we're going to achieve this is basically through like a central layer, a single on-chain layer that can distribute and kind of coordinate transactions across every other blockchain. This is kind of the idea that we're trying to build today. We haven't announced it just yet. I think probably 3 or 4 weeks we're going to do a big announcement about this idea of chain abstraction and how we're building towards it. But this will kind of incorporate social logins. So this same flow that I just went through, it's going to be pretty similar, but with our infrastructure that we're building now, a user will be able to onboard to an application via social login. They won't know what chain they're on, so they'll just start using the application, one balance for every chain. If you're on Avalanche or any of its subnets, you have the same balance. This is kind of the idea. Then you start using the application, super simple, and it's like almost Web 2 at that point. You've abstracted away like 99% of the complexity. Onboarding is easy, interaction is easy, there's no friction when moving across chains. This is the experience that we're trying to build towards. So right now, our main product is social logins, but that's going to extend into this chain abstraction idea very soon. So if you want to actually like play around with social logins and kind of try it for yourself, we have this cool website here. It's pretty new. It's core-demo.particle.network. We support about like 65 chains now. So if I scroll through here, as you can see, like basically everything. If I open up Avalanche, we have both mainnet and testnet support. So open this up, and I'll connect with my Google account. Let me decline this. I'm getting a Telegram call from one of our old colleagues at the last company that I was at. Cool, so I'm going to log into this account. And here we go. So again, very similar to the same flow as last time, but I'm now on the Avalanche mainnet. We support non-EVM chains too, like Solana, but really our focus is on EVM chains like Avalanche. I'm in this account. I can go ahead and choose my account abstraction wallet. So again, light, simple, Bitcoin, etc. I'll choose this one. As you can see, this is the same address that I just had on the demo applications. I can send out tokens, ERC20 tokens, and through the same wallet, I can do Solana transactions, same login. So this is kind of the idea. We want one interface for every chain. The user has no idea, they have no conception of if they're on Avalanche or even like ideally in the future, Solana. It should be like one unified experience that they use. So this is kind of what we're building towards at Particle. We're kind of creating this suite of user experience solutions that all collectively contribute to the idea of onboarding like a significant amount of users. So we feel like we've done this in some capacity, especially with Avalanche. But going into the future, we hope that this idea of like chain abstraction, tying it in with social logins and whatnot, will make it easier for not only users to onboard, but ideally it'll give developers more incentive to actually build where it makes sense for them. So what we see a lot today is like some developers are hesitant to, for example, build application-specific chains, so app chains, or they're hesitant to go to certain different blockchains because maybe they want the user base on some different ecosystem, right? But chain abstraction will ideally remove this entire concept, so developers will just deploy wherever they think it makes most sense for their application, rather than wherever like the most TVL is or the most users are, because users will be like a unified, basically, resource for everybody to share across every chain. And in that case, the only thing that will matter is the value of the applications. So this is kind of what we're doing and what we're building towards, supercharging UX. And we should have a pretty large announcement about this chain abstraction idea quite soon. We actually haven't told anybody about this. Like we've told like 10 people here at ETHDenver, so it's a pretty new thing for us. But yeah, social logins and chain abstraction, this is our core thing. If you want, our Twitter is on that QR code. Our website is particle.network. We just released brand new documentation after a long time. It was like 5 months of work. So it's developers.particle.network. We have everything you need to know about what we're building, how to use the SDKs that I just went through, and so on. But I think that is about it for what I had planned today.
After you had showcased the Auth and the Connect, one thing that I noticed was that you still had to sign transactions once you were logged in. Is that the paymaster that auto signs transactions, or how does that flow work?
Yeah, so transaction signatures, the way that we handle it is like kind of two ways. So whenever you do a transaction, if your paymaster is set up to help sign that transaction, then they can actually contribute what like typically you would see in like programmatically called the paymaster signature. So this is actually, I think, defined as a field called paymaster and data. So whenever you send a transaction, this is an optional field that if your transaction will be sponsored, this field will be filled in. If it is filled in, then your transaction is gasless because this paymaster is basically saying, I'm going to cover your gas fees. I'm going to pay myself back with the funds which you've deposited on the platform, right? When it comes to actually user signatures, like whenever they're like clicking confirm, this is something like a lot of applications hate, like the fact that users have to do this, and like we agree, because whenever you're building a game or anything that requires like a lot of transactions, this breaks down the experience really, really quickly. So with account abstraction, one of the big attractions is session keys. So we see a lot of applications that have been incorporating session keys, where you can basically delegate transaction signatures to like temporary private keys that will sign transactions under very specific conditions that you agree to on chain. So you sign a transaction that basically says, this is what I will allow this private key to do within my account, right? They can sign transactions that are under $10 in value and are like within this 24-hour period, right? That's the conditions that you set. Then you can click on a button. You won't sign anything, but that key that you've like given temporary access to, that'll sign that transaction for you. For the end user, it's signless. They don't have to do any pop-ups, and that creates an experience that might be kind of more attractive for games or social play applications or things that require that level of user experience.
Any other question? No? Great. Thank you so much, Ethan.